This video is brought to you by Atlas VPN.
Sean Bean, the people's champion. A man who's most famously for his on-screen death, such as the time when 007 dropped a radar dish on his head. Or that time when he tried to play politics in Westeros and didn't make much headway. But of course, we all remember the time when he was turned into a giant warrior pincushion, courtesy of the Uruk-hai of Isengard. But there is one character that has survived the test of time and been played by Sean Bean, and that is Richard Sharpe, a dashing rifleman who fought his way across the Iberian Peninsula during the Napoleonic Wars. But why a video about Sean Bean and Richard Sharpe? I'm glad you asked. Reason number one, well, it's Richard Sharpe, it's Sean Bean, and it's Napoleonics, and they're the things I get out of bed for. Honestly, they truly are. But the other reason, recently we did a little collaboration with Games Night. Now, if you don't know who Games Night are, they are a fun Battle Report channel. Check the link in the description. They do all sorts of stuff, lots of different theme games, but they are heavily story-driven, really narrative, lots of cliffhangers, and I strongly recommend giving them a watch. But they kindly asked us to join them, and we created an episode of Sharpe, which was absolutely amazing to do. And this is a homage to that, and also teaching people how to paint the stuff that was featured in that show as well.
We think we know at this stage what a VPN is, right? With a simple click of a button, you can whisk yourself off to another country online. Oh, that didn't seem to work. I'll try again. Bonjour la France, je suis Atlas VPN. So with Atlas VPN, not only can you unlock your favourite content from different countries online, if it's a quiet day in the office, I'm partial to putting my feet up and watching Mean Girls on Canadian Netflix. You go, Glen Coco. Atlas VPN also keeps your searches private, stops ads and malware by stopping malicious links, ads and trackers. It'll even notify you if someone's trying to steal your data. It saves you some money online while shopping. That includes subscriptions like Netflix and Spotify, but also airlines, hotels, and more. Atlas VPN also protects you on an unlimited amount of devices. So if you've got a desktop, a laptop, your mobile, it's all covered under one subscription. And you can now enjoy the Black Friday price cut, because now Atlas VPN Premium is just $1.70 per month plus 6 months free extra with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Protect your privacy and get many benefits of Atlas VPN for a ridiculously low price. You can take this deal by clicking on the link in the video description. You've got to be fast because this is a limited time offer. Now, after my adventures, it's back to Peachy painting Napoleonic stuff. Sean Bean, stab.
But without further ado, let's crack on and paint Sharpe. So starting off with Richard Sharpe, we're going to begin with an undercoat of Mechanica Standard Grey. So doing this all over, and I'm going to get some black green. I'm going to paint this mostly over the model. Try and keep it to the cloth, like the tunic and the trousers. If you get on other things, don't worry, because you can paint over those in a bit. Next up is to pick out all the black details, such as belt, straps, fur and lace. And for this, I'm just using black. Then it's dirty red for the sash. You might want to do a couple of coats just to get a nice strong red coming through. Then I'm going to pick out his skin using cork. Then for his hair, I'm going to start off with dark brown. I know in the show he has like blonde hair. I'm going to start with dark brown first and also pick out the musket and other brown related details. Then for any silver details, I'm going to use oily steel. For the brass, I'm going to be using brass. And once all those bits are applied, any tidying up you might need to do if you've got like some black on the green or whatever, do that now. And then we're going to coat over with Black Knight Deep Shade. I'm going to do that all over and leave them to dry. So our model is now at a point where it's tabletop ready, so you can base it and start playing games with it. But if you want to add some extra love, we're going to do that now, where we're going to add some highlights to Richard Sharpe. I mean, as a character, it's Richard Sharpe. He needs love. We love him, so we're going to highlight him. So our first stage is to tidy up those base coats if needed. So all I'm going to do here is get that green, just tidy that back up, add a bit more punch to it. Same for like the flesh, as well as the browns and the silvers. You don't have to go too mad. It's just to add a little bit of extra punch to those colours. Our first highlight is going to be dark green, and this is for the uniform, acting as a highlight. And in some places you can do it as a layer. So like on his pelisse and his jacket, you can just pick out those colours a bit more broad if you need to. Then we're going to highlight the fur. Of this, we're using ash grey. And then I'll also do that on some other details, like maybe some of the lace here and there, as well as his boots. Then it's highlighting the skin using Radiant Flesh, just picking out like the nose, the brow, the cheeks, the lips, stuff like that. His ears, don't forget his ears. Otherwise he can't hear commands, because we have 2 ears and only 1 mouth, so we should listen twice as much as we speak. Thanks, Teresa. We're now going to highlight the hair. For this, I'm using light earth, and in places you might want to mix some dark brown into there as well, just for a bit of transition so it's not too stark. Then I'm going to get a little bit of light green and mix that into the dark green just for some highlights on his tunic and trousers. If you got like a lighter green, you can use that. I just had those at hand and just mixed them on the wet palette. So our Richard Sharpe is now highlighted up, so all we need to do now is base. Before we base, you will notice I have used pennies on this model. I use that for all my Napoleonics, mostly skirmishes, and a lot of people do that as well. It's quite a cost-effective way of actually basing your models. Two reasons. One, it's quite sturdy because it's metal and keeps those plastic models from keep falling over. And second, it's really cheap because you can get 100 pennies for £1. I know, maths right. That's 100 bases. You tell me elsewhere where you can get 100 bases for £1. Nowhere. It's mad. So that's what we use, pennies. But don't deface the Queen's face or the King. Whichever. You always have that at the bottom. Can't deface that. That's a crime. Sharpe will not be happy. First, we're using muddy ground. In places, I'm going to use a bit of water just so I can move around the feet, so it's just a bit easier to get it in those nooks and crannies, and then just build up the layers of muddy ground. And once that's thoroughly dried, you need to get some light earth and then just dry brush that over. This is just going to help pick out some of that texture. If you want to, you can dry brush some of this around the trousers for a bit of dirt and dust as well. Then it's classic Steel Legion drab for the rim, and I'm going to get some old school static grass, a little bit of super glue first, dop that on here and there, and then I'm just going to drop it into my tub of static grass, get some tweezers, move it around, and then once you get it out, just give it a little tap on its bum. Any excess will just fall off. With Sean being done, we're now going to move on to a classic British red coat from the Napoleonic Wars. This guy is one of the ones featured in the game. It's the 7th Fusiliers, but you can just change the collars and cuffs to whatever colour scheme you want to do, but this is a nice quick way of getting those red coats onto the tabletop. After a grey undercoat, the first step is to get some white grey, and I'm going to dry brush this all over the model. I'm going to be quite heavy around things like straps or stuff that I want light or white, and then just a bit lighter around things like the trousers. But you know what, if it does get a bit heavy, don't worry, because you'll be adding paint later anyway. Then we're going to apply some bar red to the jacket and the plume. Now, do expect some of this to go on the white, like the straps. That's fine, because we'll tie those straps up later. It's more just to get into those recesses, but as it dries, some of those previous white grey highlights will pop through a little bit. They won't look too pink, but they will give you a nice little subtle highlight. Then it's moving on to all the black details. This is shoes, the haversack, the shako, hair if you want it to be as well. Just work your way around picking out those black details. Then we move on to the brown, and for this we're using dark brown, and we're picking out the musket, the hair if you want to, as well as the canteen strap and the canteen itself. Then for the side bags, I mean, you can paint those white, but I'm going to do beige because it helps break up the shape a little bit. So just a couple of coats of beige on there. Then sky blue for the canteen. Really like that colour scheme, having sky blue canteens. Just a couple of coats on the actual canteen itself. Then we'll move on to the skin. And for this, again, I'm using cork because it's an amazing colour and I use it all the time. Again, you might want to do a couple of coats. Then for any silver details, we're using oily steel. And again, for the brass, we're using brass. And at this point, you can decide what you want to do with the collars and cuffs. Again, I said I'm going to be doing mine as the 7th Fusiliers, so I'm using Storm Fiend here. I've not tied up the white at this point because I know there's some white details on the collar and the cuffs, so get the blue on first, or the green or yellow, whichever regiment you're going to do. Get that on, let it dry, and then we'll move on to the tidying up. Again, just work your way around, picking out those straps, the rucksack or haversack straps, like little bits of lace on his chest, on his collar, on his cuff, anything that just needs a little bit more punch. This is the time to do it. Then last up is to apply a shade all over, and this is going to be Black Knight again, and I'm applying that all over and let that run into the recesses. This is a real quick way of getting the model onto the tabletop. So at this point, you can leave your model like that. Once you've got like 30 or 40 of these figures in a battalion, it will look great, so you don't even need to highlight them. But as a top tip, what we're going to do now is what I call the regiment level. Which is when you've got like 30, 40 figures, just going to highlight the face. So we're going to move on to that now for regiment level. And for that, we're just going to tidy up the face with cork again. So kind of a highlight. And then we're also going to do a highlight of radiant flesh as well. So all we're doing here is picking out the skin, nothing else. So there we are. We've got it up to this point where you could just do a regiment. When you've got the model based and you've got like flags in the unit that will look exceptional, you don't have to worry about like picking out the rest of the colours, like highlighting the reds, doing the white. You can just leave them at that and they'll look great as a regiment. And some of the things in the show I did that with as well. But if you're playing skirmish games or you want to put a bit more love, stay tuned for the next steps because that's where we're going to do some highlights. Seeing as we've already done the skin, we don't need to touch that now. So I'm going to move on to the red jacket. And first of all, I've used bar red, so I'm just going to tidy it with some blood red, which is nice and punchy. And in places, that's going to act as a highlight as well as a layer. Then get some burnt orange for final highlight, just on some of those folds of the cloth. Ash grey to highlight any black details. Again, shako, boots, the haversack. If needs be, you can tidy up the straps with some white grey again. And also on the lace and the collars and cuffs. And an extra top tip, which I've learnt from a few good friends, is using a chrome pen for swords and bayonets. This might feel like you're undoing some of the painting the bayonet silver, but actually it's just adding a little bit of extra shine to that, and it looks great when you've got the regiment all together in like line or column formation, because the natural light around is just picking up that chrome effect and just glitters like it would in the sun. It's just a real quick, easy way of making your bayonets look like you put more time into them than you actually have. So top tip, do that for swords, or do that on cavalry as well. Now, if you have any Scots in your army, stay tuned, because we're going to do a little bit of tartan. No, we didn't do any Scots in the actual bat report with Games Night. I feel this is a perfect place to show how to paint tartan, certainly at 28mm scale. So we're going to do that now and show you how to paint the Black Watch tartan. We're going to start first. You could use light Prussian blue, but here I'm using Storm Fiend because I've already used that already in this paint guide for my collars and cuffs. So apply that all over. You might want to do a second coat. Then I get some dark green and I do some vertical stripes. First of all, just work my way around. There's a bit of a pleated section around the back, which can be a bit tricky. Just take your time with that. And then you need to do some horizontal sections as well. I tend to keep the actual tartan a bit larger than life. So I have like 2 horizontals and about 3 verticals at the front, nice and broad. Now you can mix in another green as a highlight here and there on the actual green sections themselves, but because we've got some of that lighter green we used earlier where we mixed in some light earth, I'm just going to use a bit of that. Just add a bit more punch to some of the centre sections of the green stripes. Because this is government tartan that was issued to all the Black Watch, I'm going to be adding some red pin lines to that section. So that's kind of within the green. This might take a bit of time getting used to, but this is why it's all done in the base coat stage, because if you're making mistakes, you can just go back over that previous green and redo it. And there we are. That's quite a straightforward. Most of this was all base coats. There was no highlighting. It was just all base coat applied, broad lines to start off with, and then just a really fine red line. But you don't have to have the red fine line if you don't want to. You just leave it blue and green. It will look fine. It'll look like tartan, and that's the key. Is it looking like tartan from a distance? Artistic license, not realistic example of how it should look. Our red coats are done. We're now going to move on to the French, and there's 2 ways of doing the French. The first we're going to show you is one of the regiments I used in the game, which was, they all had white, including the white tunics. A certain period in the war, they ran out of indigo dye, so it's a really quick way of painting French if you don't want to like faff around and do all the blue jackets. So we're going to do that first, and then just, if you want to do the traditional looking French infantry with the blue jackets, we'll add that on at the end, how to do that. So from a white undercoat, we're going to get some Soulblight Grey and apply this all over. That is just going to run into those cracks and add some nice definition to all the details and pretty much shade most of the white. With the Soulblight Grey dry, we're now going to pick out all the black details. So that's things like the shoes, the haversack, the shako, even the hair if you want it to be. So just work your way around picking those details out. Then we're going to use some brown. Again, this is for things like the musket, the hair if you want to, mustaches, they like their mustaches and beards, and canteen straps as well. The actual backpack itself, because it's fur, just thin down that brown a little bit and it'll just look a little bit lighter and like a different tone of brown, even though it's the same colour, you just thinned it down. Then we're picking out the skin using cork. Again, a couple of coats if you need to. So for any silver details, we're going to be using oily steel, so work your way across the musket and anything else on the model that might look silver. Then again, brass for the brass bits. Again, this is going to be on the musket, but also they have like a little shako plate as well, so pick that out. Like the British red coat, depending on the regiment that you're doing, you might want to do a different colour for the collars and cuffs. With this particular regiment, I'm going to go red, although it's not quite the same as the one in the actual battle report that we did. It will make sense later on when we add blue. So this is just red for a standard fusilier that you would probably recognise from the French army. And I'm just going to get some granite and use that for the bedroll at the back. Also, depending on what company you're going to do your French as, they have different coloured pom-poms. Red is for the grenadiers, and then they have a multitude of colours. And if you do voltigeurs, which are like the light infantry, they have green and yellow because they have like a little bit of extra bit at the top. But this one is the second company, which is sky blue. So use sky blue. And at this point, just tie up any white sections using white grey. Again, if you've got any like lace or like your belts have got like bits of black on it or brown, just tidy back up. And then we're going to get some Black Knight Deep Shade again and apply that all over. Surprise. Like our previous models, you can just play games with them. You can always do the regiment level as well if you wanted to, like I did with the British Red Coat, where you can just highlight the face and leave it at that. But we're going to move on to the next steps now, just showing you how to highlight it and also turn your French Fusilier into a more traditional French Fusilier. For our next steps, we're going to start by tying up the white because we've got some shade on there, just going to make it the majority of the model. Again, we're doing this on the tunic as well because this is for the version that has white tunics. Then tie up any remaining base coats if need be. So this is going to be like things like the black, any brown, any silvers, the skin as well. So just work your way around and tie up those previous base coats if they need it. Then we're going to highlight the black using ash grey, highlight the skin using radiant flesh. Again, work your way around. And if you do have moustaches, apply the colour for the moustache now. And then we're going to get a chrome pen and just pick out that bayonet. And at this point, our French line infantryman is now done in the white uniform, but to turn it into the traditional blue, we're just going to get some Stormfiend and apply a coat to the tunic. And when that's dry, we're going to apply a second coat. Both of these are quite thinned down, 50-50 water and Stormfiend. First coat, same mix again for the second coat. It's just to add a bit more definition and you'll get some highlights popping out as well. And if you need to, at this point, you can just tidy up any white as well that you might have done. But this is the traditional way of doing your French Fusiliers. So there we are, our very own paint guide to painting Richard Sharpe, aka Sean Bean. And guess what? He survived yet again. I'm so chuffed. Good job, Rich.
Delivery!
No! Oh, Pat! Oh, no. So, whether you're a fan of Sharpe, you have an abundance of British or French to work through, or you're delving into the horrors of the silver bayonet, I hope you found this video useful. And of course, don't forget to check out the battle report we did with Games Night, which was Sharpe's return. It was good fun. It felt like we were playing an actual episode of Sharpe as well. So go check them out. You will not be disappointed. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. That obviously helps the channel. And of course, massive thank you to our patrons for even allowing us to do mad things like that. You guys are magnificent. Thank you very much. You bunch of beautiful, in the words of Sean Bean.
And just before you go, remember, you can now enjoy the Black Friday price cut because Atlas VPN is just $1.70 per month and you get 6 months extra with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Protect your privacy and get many benefits of Atlas VPN for this ridiculously low price. You can take this deal by clicking the link in the video description below. Be quick, it's a limited time offer.